France? Because who has a French accent? Do I even know what a French accent sounds like? This is making me think perhaps I don't. Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be doing a non-spoiler review for Castlevania Nocturne. And typically my reviews are relatively structured. I like to go through various different elements and dive into why they did or did not work. And for Nocturne, pretty much nothing worked. This is going to be more of a rant, just going through why I thought this was such an enormous disappointment and a huge letdown and step down from what I'm just going to call Castlevania, the first of the 4 seasons that we got, because this is kind of a spin-off continuation. And I'm going to try to not just compare everything to the original, because I think that this is kind of going for a slightly different tone, and that's fine. And the other one, it's something that I think a lot of us now are so attached to and we liked so much, and I don't want to be that person that just wanted this to be a repeat of that. I just wanted it to be a repeat in quality. I didn't want it to be the exact same thing again. I was fully anticipating having totally different characters, a very different setting, and I was actually excited for that because I wanted to see what I came to love about Castlevania, the really intense monologues and the characters that start off with chips on their shoulders and you grow to love them and you start to understand why they are the way they are, and they kind of have the storied past that you get bits and pieces of, and then have villains introduced and you get all of that. I wanted that same set of ingredients, but obviously have a different end result, as we are mixing in the French Revolution type of setting. We are looking at a much younger cast of characters, but I just thought they couldn't nail any individual element aside from the animation, which continues to be great. I thought the animators did a great job. I liked the animation in the first, so they continue to be phenomenal. Whether it was the same group of people or not, I'm not sure, but the animation was fantastic, so at least that held up. But I am going to zero in on specific elements of this that are removed from the original, and also from the games, I should say, because I know for a lot of people that's where their love of this originated from. I'm not going to be talking about those things. I'm just going to be talking about this in isolation. The first biggest thing was the fact that I think this show seemed to have this idea that character backstories and motivations are the same thing as character depth, and they're not. I think that you'll see so often, if you're a writer or if you're somebody who's very interested in the process of writing, you will see time and time again, people will encourage writers to stay away from flashback sequences. And what I don't like is sometimes reviewers have a tendency to see that, and then any medium, whether it's a show or a movie or a manga or a book, if there is a flashback sequence, they'll just immediately decide that it must be a con, and they won't actually analyze whether that flashback sequence did its job, whether it created a lot of emotion, if it connected you to the reader, if it did something interesting with how it connects to present day. It's just, if it's there, some reviewers are like, oh, that's bad. And I don't like painting with such a broad stroke. I think sometimes flashback sequences can be exceptional. I think the Stormlight Archive utilizes them exceptionally well. I think the Fractured Timeline, which is a little different than flashback sequences, but Fractured Timeline, we've seen someone like V.E. Schwab accomplish that very well in Vicious and Vengeful. Here, it was like an exact thing to point to, an example to point to of why it sometimes doesn't work, because it was so frequently the same formula. A character would be introduced, here's their backstory. Now this character is introduced, here's their backstory. And then you would never get another defining thing about them again. They would just keep on going as things happened around them. And I didn't feel like their personalities were very distinct. They were very superficial. They were very surface level. You know, you could say Richter is like kind of flippant and cocky. And then you have Annette, who's just like, she has this that's not even a personality trait. I was about to say she has this dark backstory, but she's resilient, I suppose you could say. A little stupid sometimes. Let's just barge into somewhere. And Richter's like, hey, we need a plan. And she's like, what? No, he's right. You do need a plan. Anyway, we'll get into spoilers in a spoiler discussion, because I will save spoilers for a separate video, and I will be discussing with other people, so we'll be able to get into specifics then. So I'm going to shy away from specifics. But regardless, I wanted personality, and I wanted personality to be shown with these characters through their interactions with one another, or through the way that they would deal with their struggles. I mean, there were scenes where a character would be trying to process their trauma, and really all it came down to was like, I'm crying, somebody was telling me like, I've experienced trauma too, and then the bad guy showed up and I'm like, I have things to live for, and you're like, that's not processing trauma, that's not overcoming this thing that's plagued this person for years and years and years. There's not even I can't even look at that and think that's a very, I'll use the example of Richter. I can't even look at that and be like, that's such a Richter way to handle that problem. Because what even would be a Richter way to handle the problem? Because there isn't any distinction with the characters. They're all just, this one is this way and this one's this way, and they don't have depth. They have backstories so that you know their situation, but they don't have depth. And also, the way that the backstories would play out also I did not think was very elegant. It wasn't interesting. It was just a character would be like, long ago, this thing happened to me, and then you'd go and see. Or, this was my story back in the day, and then you'd find out, and then that person would be like, that's why I am the way I am. And they would pretty much announce that, like, now that you know my history, you know who I am. And I'm like, no, I don't. I don't, actually. I know what happened to you, but that's not who you are. The whole idea of trauma from your childhood coming into the picture, I loved the idea of that. I loved seeing a character... I don't want to say I loved seeing them suffer, because that sounds really dark, but I loved that we were going to explore how a character would transform and how they would have to heal from something, or maybe they wouldn't completely heal, but they would start to learn how to deal with this thing that's been weighing on them, that they've been putting off and maybe didn't even acknowledge for so long. I thought we would really get into that, and I liked the idea of it, but it was just like their personalities. It was so shallow and superficial. I wanted the interesting monologues and the interesting commentary on the human existence and the way that we mistreat each other and what we see as monstrous. And I wanted all of those things. I wanted the complex morality, which I didn't really see in this as well. And that leads me to the antagonists. The antagonists weren't interesting at all. They had interesting design, I guess you could say, although the one was basically Hisoka. I'm like, that's from Hunter x Hunter, right? That's who that is. They're just in a different outfit, because that's that person. But they, in their reasoning, their motivations, why they did the things that they did, it was basically like, because I'm evil. And I'm like, nobody likes those kinds of villains. No one. Not even like when we're little kids, we don't even like those kinds of villains. We want there to be a reason why the character, or at least they are some interesting like mirror to the main characters, or they themselves have a dark past and it leads them to go about things a certain way, and you kind of feel for them, and then you feel bad that you're feeling for them because you know what they're doing is wrong or how they're going about it is wrong, but you're conflicted because you're like, oh, but I kind of get it. None of that. It was just like, we're vampires and people should bow down to us. And I'm like, oh, geez, whatever. The antagonists were just, they were dumb, and like they were all, everything was about the aesthetic, which is interesting because I'm like, is this France? Because who has a French accent? Do I even know what a French accent sounds like? This is making me think perhaps I don't.
What's so special about here? Well, there's only so much pious bullshit I can stand.
So the aesthetic was kind of odd because in some ways I don't think they utilized this French Revolution French setting enough, and then in other ways I feel like they tried, but then it didn't work. So it was just like I almost thought they should have just been like, this is vaguely French Revolution-esque, but not bothered to say like, this is this place and this is this time period. Like, don't tell us that, because then we're gonna expect certain things. And it just, the setting was weird and it felt both accurate and extremely inaccurate at times. I was excited. I thought that it was going to be French Revolution, but if there were vampires, what would that look like? And what would it look like if you had this upper class that was filled with vampires, and then everyone else, they're the humans, and they're trying to combat not only the differences in finances, but the difference in power. This dynamic would be interesting to explore. But it didn't really deliver on that, because it just felt like it was the vibes. It just felt like it was the decoration for how they were dressed. Kind of. The one lady, I'm like, is she into BDSM? Because that does not look French at all, which was kind of a cool outfit, and it was kind of cool character designs. I don't really care if the vampires have their own unique style, that's fine. But then other times they would have French outfits. I'm like, pick. What is going on? And so, I don't know, that frustrated me a lot too. I think it frustrated my husband way more because he constantly was just like, what are these accents? And he was losing it a little bit. I'm gonna shift now though. I'm so sorry that so much of this is so negative. If you really liked it, I probably should have said at the beginning, like, maybe don't watch. But I also thought it was so painfully predictable, and this is where I can't give spoilers, and this we'll get into more in the spoiler discussion. But I'll just say, like, as soon as one person would be introduced, I'm like, well, that person and that person have this situation. I just knew immediately. And then so every little hint they would give along the way was not a hint. It was just an extreme confirmation. And then when the reveal would happen, it was like, oh my gosh, gasp. But I'm like, it was obvious the second they were introduced. And then there's something to do with singing in the season, and I was like, oh, I bet the singing is gonna like help certain individuals gain their humanity, and that's exactly what was happening. I'm like, sure, okay. The singing also, that's not opera, but I digress. I wanted the twists and turns. I wanted those gasp-worthy moments that I know were okay. The last scene though, they got me. I was like, all right, I guess all the rest of it was worth it, because that scene I was like, oh, I did get very excited at that last scene. I have to say, some of the dialogue with the characters and some of the reveals, the way the characters would handle them and react to them. There's one where you find out a certain identity of a person, and they did not play it cool whatsoever. It actually made me start laughing because they like announce who this person is, and then the character's like, their eyes are darting around back and forth, and I started laughing because I'm like, okay, you could have handled this much better. You could have been a little bit cooler here. And then the dialogue, though, there's one scene in particular where I'm like, that's some of the worst dialogue it was a cool scene, but the dialogue was so painfully bad because one of our characters is being held, because of course they can't just kill him. They have to like have their cool bad guy monologue, except for it wasn't cool. It was dumb because they're just like, you have people you care about. You have a girl who's a sister but not a sister, and a woman who's a mother but she's not actually your mother. And I'm like, what is this dialogue? Thank you for letting us know, in case we were confused, that it's not romantic between these characters. Also, they're not literally related. They're just like a sister and like a mother. It was like so dumb. I thought it did so many things poorly. To me, if I had gone in perhaps with different expectations of this is just going to be a fun action story with vampires, then that might have helped, because to me it ended up resulting in, if the CW cartoons had cursing and sometimes a little more blood. That's what it felt like, and that's fine. It's just not what I was expecting or wanting from this, especially after the other Castlevania, because the other Castlevania was so good. And I was patient. For a while I was reserving judgment because I was thinking, well, you know, the first 4 episodes of the other Castlevania I thought kind of sucked. And then I kept watching, and then it was extremely heartbreaking. It was one of the best things I've watched. So I was holding out, and then I'm like, all right, this has been much longer than 4 episodes, because it only took about 4 before things started to get really good in the other one. Basically, its first season. And then this one, I'm like, all right, okay, now we're on episode 5, now we're on episode 6, and this is still, like, it's just getting worse, and all the things I thought were true, I'm like, yep, there's that reveal that was obvious. So, anyway, you get the point. I was hoping for more. Now, I will say that final scene, as soon as it happened, I was like, I mean, the show was pretty good. It was all right. So that stupid final scene got me. I'm very curious, without going into spoilers, if any of you also were like, okay, I guess it's all right when you saw that last scene. Because, I mean, I'm gonna want to see more Castlevania now. They should get me with quality, not with one interesting thing at the end. Anyway, that's it for non-spoilers. I'm sure there's so many other things that I didn't care for that I forgot to talk about, but oh well. I'm curious your thoughts if you have watched this, if you liked it. I'm so sorry. I obviously did not, but when I do my spoiler discussion, one of my friends did like it, so it'll balance things out a little bit. It'll be much more balanced than this was, and you can then, you know, latch on to their opinions. But I would love to know your thoughts on this. And if you are actually a fan of the original, if you're a fan of the video games, then I would be very curious your insight, because I know it would be a whole other level of, if you're disappointed, it would be probably disappointment in different ways, then for me, I was pretty much just looking at this as its own thing. Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.